My name is Shereen Cohen. I'm a postdoctoral fellow and a LEN trainee at the Mind Institute, and I'm here to talk today about positive behavior supports. So first of all, what is positive behavior support? Positive behavior support is defined as a set of research-based strategies used to increase quality of life and decrease problem behavior by teaching new skills and making changes in a person's environment. So let's break that down. First of all, research-based strategies. So these are strategies that have been supported by previous research studies showing that these strategies do help to increase quality of life. That's the main goal of positive behavior support, and decrease problem behavior, which is another goal of positive behavior support, by teaching new skills. So we're trying to teach replacement behaviors, and we're doing that by making changes in the person's environment. So I'm going to talk a lot more about all of these aspects of positive behavior support. First of all, let's talk about some behavioral principles. The first thing to keep in mind is that all behavior has a function. The child is doing whatever the behavior is in order to get some outcome that they want. Also, inappropriate and inappropriate behaviors are learned and maintained through the things that follow that behavior. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. And finally, children and adults will do what works to get their needs met. So, children are not necessarily trying to just make you upset. They're trying to get some sort of need met, and it's really important to keep that in mind. So let's talk about the ABCs of behavior: antecedents, behaviors, and consequences. What is an antecedent? An antecedent is what happens before the behavior. So we can think of this as maybe the trigger or the setting event for the behavior. So some examples of an antecedent might be asking the child to do something, setting a boundary or saying no, or transitioning between activities. Lots of other things can also be antecedents. Those are just some examples. So behavior, what is a behavior? Behavior is an action in response to an antecedent. It can be appropriate or inappropriate, and some examples might include the child follows the instruction to sit down, they sit in the chair, they continue playing with the toy, or they scream and cry. Another important thing to keep in mind about a behavior when we're trying to really define the behavior is it's something that a dead person can't do. So just doing nothing does not count as a behavior. What is the child doing? And it's important to be able to really clearly and objectively define the behavior. And then what is a consequence? A consequence is what happens after the behavior. So there are two primary types of consequences. There's reinforcement and punishment. And again, I'm going to come back to those concepts in just a minute. And some examples of consequences might be the child is given a cookie, the child receives praise, verbal praise, or the child is sent to timeout. Just some examples of possible consequences of behaviors. And a consequence has kind of a negative connotation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's negative. Again, a consequence can be something positive as well. It just means whatever comes after the behavior. So how do we find the function of a behavior? Well, we're going to look for patterns in the time. Is there a specific time of day that this behavior is happening more, a specific activity, a specific place, a specific setting? Are there particular antecedents that tend to come before the target behavior, or certain consequences that tend to follow the target behavior, like maybe the child gets a lot of attention every time they throw themselves on the floor and start screaming in class. So the goal is to identify the function of the behavior. So we look for these patterns and we start to develop some hypotheses about what might be the function of the behavior. And once we feel confident that we know the function of the behavior, we can start to identify appropriate alternative behaviors. So, sorry, I meant to put this one before. Let me talk about this first and then I'll go back to the other slide. So this is one way that we can record antecedents, behaviors, and consequences in order to help identify some of these patterns. So a parent or a teacher or other service provider might be asked to keep a log for maybe a week and start recording what some of the problematic behaviors are. So let's say tantrums are the target behavior. We want to really clearly define what is the tantrum looking like, what is the child doing, how long is it lasting, and we want to record the time, date, location, what was happening right before that started, and what happened after, what was the consequence. What did I do or say? What did other people in the situation do or say? So what are common functions of behaviors? Functions of behaviors generally fall into one of these four categories. Attention is one, and this can be positive or negative attention, but attention is often a function of behavior. Access to some specific item or activity or food. Avoidance of a non-preferred activity, for example, or escape from a non-preferred activity or situation. And sometimes it's automatic. Sometimes it's sort of self-reinforcing or sensory. Sometimes, you know, if you just have a stomach ache, that's not something other people can necessarily observe, but you might be acting kind of cranky. And so the function of the behavior could just be, you know, needing some sort of resolution to an internal process that's going on that's causing some upset or some sort of need, some sort of internal need. So generally, the function of the behavior falls into one of these four categories. And we can use these tracking sheets to help us figure out what the function of the behavior is likely to be. So now I just want to also go over some terminology. This is a personal pet peeve for me, though a lot of these terms get misused. So I want to just be on the same page and make sure we're all speaking the same language here. So as I mentioned before, consequences fall into two categories. I'm not sure if the recording will pick up my mouse, but hopefully it is. So reinforcement is one, and reinforcement is anything that increases or maintains the behavior. Punishment, on the other hand, is anything that decreases the behavior. Positive is adding something. So there can be positive reinforcement and positive punishment. Positive reinforcement is adding something that makes the person feel good, that is going to lead to an increase or maintenance of the behavior. I'm going to talk about some examples in just a minute. Punishment is adding something the person does not like, adding an aversive, unpleasant stimulus, which is aimed at decreasing the behavior. Now, negative reinforcement, which is often confused with punishment, negative reinforcement, again, reinforcement is anything that increases behavior or maintains behavior. So negative reinforcement means removing something bad, removing something the person does not like, does not want, and that has the result of, by definition, because it's reinforcement, increasing or maintaining the behavior. And similarly, negative punishment is removing something good, which by definition has the result of decreasing behavior. Anything that is reinforcing increases or maintains behavior. Anything that is punishing reduces behavior. Let's talk about some examples. So positive reinforcement can be things like praise, treats, preferred objects, or preferred activities. So great job doing your homework. Now you get to go play outside. Negative reinforcement is, again, removing something that the person does not like. So some common examples might be, you behaved so well in class today, you don't have to do the homework assignment that everyone else has to do. Or you don't have to do your chores today because you did such a nice job helping your sister. Another example that most people can relate to is if you've ever gotten in the car and started to drive before putting your seatbelt on. The car does that really annoying sound, and when you put your seatbelt on, the sound stops. Your car has just reinforced you using negative reinforcement, and you're more likely in the future probably to put on your seatbelt before you start driving. Now, punishment, again, anything that decreases behavior. Common examples that people might use might be scolding or yelling, adding extra chores or extra homework, again, adding something aversive. And then negative punishment is removing something positive. So something like timeout, which is removing fun and attention. The child is now not allowed to do anything fun. They're not getting any attention. They're sitting in a corner staring at a wall or whatever it might be. Loss of privileges, so maybe, you know, you lose recess, you lose screen time. Loss of toys, you know, you didn't put away your toys, so now mom is taking away all the Legos. So these are just some examples. Some important things to note, actually, again, I'm going to jump around a little bit. An important thing to note is that what is reinforcing or punishing for one person might not be the same for everyone. So those are common examples that people will tend to think of as reinforcing or punishing, but I have worked with a child who hated verbal praise, screamed when mom would praise him, "Stop saying thank you, stop saying good job." So what we think might be reinforcing for one child or adult or anybody is not necessarily reinforcing. So sometimes there's a little bit of trial and error, and we can make some educated guesses based on what is typically reinforcing or punishing for most people, but it's important to remember that you're tracking that behavior, you're looking at antecedents and consequences, and if you're giving a lot of praise and the behavior that you want to see is going down and behavior you don't want to see is going up, maybe you need to shift how you are punishing or reinforcing behaviors. The other thing to keep in mind is these principles work on you too. Parents, teachers, other service providers, we are all subject to the principles of reinforcement and punishment. So an example is, let's say, you know, a child starts crying, you give them what they want, they stop crying. Hey, you just got reinforced, negative reinforcement, by the way. You were just negatively reinforced by the cessation of crying to give the child what they want. And so as adults, we have to be really mindful of these things and sometimes kind of fight our own instincts and our own reinforcement histories in order to make these adjustments to the child's behavior, because now I've just been reinforced for giving the child what they want when they cry, and the child's just been reinforced for crying. So they're more likely to cry in the future, and I'm more likely to give them what they want when they do. So I have to kind of fight that instinct if I don't want the crying to continue and increase. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now let's talk about why punishment is actually less effective than reinforcement. And this is a really key aspect of why positive behavior is so effective, because it really focuses on the reinforcement and less on punishment. So research has shown that effects of punishment are often temporary, will often lead to other problematic behaviors popping up for the purpose of escape, avoidance. So maybe some aggression or negative emotional reactions are more likely to crop up. They may only suppress the behavior when the threat of punishment is present. So they might just kind of get better at not getting caught than actually not doing the behavior. And as I've already mentioned, what is thought to punish may actually reinforce. So sometimes, you know, in a classroom, if a teacher is reprimanding or yelling at a student when they've done something wrong, maybe we think that that's aversive, but also the child's getting a lot of attention. And maybe that's what they actually wanted all along. Not that this is a conscious process on behalf of the child, but sometimes that is reinforcing, even though we don't think it ought to be. So that's another thing to keep in mind about punishment. It might not have the effect that you think it should or would. And then in terms of corporal punishment, we definitely want to look out for the potential for abuse, and also modeling aggressive behavior. So research has shown that parents for children whose parents use corporal punishment, they're more likely to act aggressively, for example, towards younger siblings often, because they've now been modeled that when somebody does something you don't like, you hit them. That's the solution. That's the behavior that's been modeled for them through social learning. So that's another thing that I think is really important to keep in mind in terms of punishment. I definitely do not recommend corporal punishment ever. Some notes on timeout, because this can be done really well and can be really effective, but there are some things that are helpful to keep in mind about the process, the procedures of timeout. So some common mistakes are making timeouts just much too long for a child at a particular developmental level. So 3 minutes is a commonly recommended length for timeout for children about ages 2 to 7. And another thing to keep in mind is when I say 3 minutes, Really, I'm saying 3 minutes plus at least 10 seconds of quiet, because if the child is screaming the entire 3 minutes and then gets let out of timeout while they're still screaming, for them, that might feel like they've been reinforced for screaming. And so 3 minutes at least have passed, and the child is sitting quietly, not making rude comments, not screaming, not whining, and then they get let out of timeout. And again, this can be a learning process. Sometimes that first couple timeouts are a lot longer than 3 minutes, and sometimes they're not. But eventually the child will learn, if I stay quiet, once 3 minutes is up, I'm going to get out of timeout. It should be in a very boring, sterile environment. So sending a child to their room where they have maybe a TV and a bunch of toys, not really effective timeout, because they've just been sent to a place that has fun things. And again, this could even be reinforcing. Maybe they were trying to escape something that, you know, they were trying to get out of doing their chores, and now they've been sent to the room with all their toys. That's not going to be very effective. So it should be in a really boring place. And some people will even create a specific timeout area that is designed to be extremely boring. And then the other thing to keep in mind is we want to practice actively ignoring the child while monitoring them for safety. So we're purposely not giving them a lot of attention, but kind of keeping an eye out of the corner of your eye just to make sure that they're safe, they're not running away, they're not tipping over in the chair or anything like that. And we're trying to keep our affect as flat, our emotional expression as flat as possible, because again, sometimes that emotional expression can be reinforcing. So practicing actively ignoring. And same goes for, you know, if the child is sitting there going, I hate you, you're the worst, you don't love me anymore. Not responding, we're just actively ignoring, making sure that they're safe, making sure they're not getting reinforced while they're in timeout, and specifically not supposed to be getting any attention of any kind. And another recommendation is, it should be immediate. So it should immediately follow the negative behavior. So it's very clear to the child what they're being sent to timeout for. And as soon as timeout ends, it's a good idea to immediately provide a new opportunity for reinforcement. So let's say the child is sent to timeout because they were refusing to clean up their toys. Great job. Okay, timeout's over. Thank you for sitting quietly. Please clean up your toys. Hey, great job cleaning up your toys. Thank you so much for cleaning up your toys. Right away, they have an opportunity to make a new choice and get reinforcement. And let's talk about extinction also. So just because we're not punishing doesn't mean we don't want to address inappropriate and problematic behaviors. So extinction is kind of like negative punishment, but we're not removing anything. We're just not giving anything. It's kind of that neutral state. So we're not providing any reinforcement. An example, again, would be active ignoring. So timeout can kind of be thought of as negative punishment because you're removing them maybe from a fun activity that they were doing, but it's also partly extinction because they're not getting any attention for it. So actively ignoring a child when they're throwing a tantrum in the store, for example, is putting that behavior on extinction, or not reinforcing that the child when they whine, where that behavior is now on extinction. So yeah, extinction is essentially just not providing any kind of reinforcement. An important thing to keep in mind is that when you first put a behavior on extinction, you are likely to first see an extinction burst before the behavior goes down. And again, this is something that has been shown in a lot of different research studies. So you can kind of think of this as if you've ever tried to use a vending machine to get something out of it, and you put the dollar in, you push the button, and nothing happens. Do you just walk away? No, you probably don't. You probably hit the button a bunch more times. Maybe you bang on the machine. Maybe you try and shake it. Maybe you even put in another dollar, maybe another couple dollars. You keep hitting those buttons and nothing is happening. So you're going to try a little bit harder before you realize, okay, this thing is just not working anymore and it's time to walk away. And so that will often happen also with children. Let's say, again, crying or, screaming, throwing a tantrum usually has worked for them. They have gotten what they want, and all of a sudden they're not getting what they want. Okay, I need to try a little harder. No, that's still not working. I'm gonna try a little harder. Well, that's not working. What if I try a little bit harder? Oh, wow, I'm really not getting what I want. Okay, this is not worth the energy, and the behavior will eventually go down. The hard thing to do is sticking with that extinction plan and really not reinforcing that behavior, because if the child goes here and you do nothing and the child goes here and then they get what they want, they've now learned, I just have to scream this much louder and then I get what I want. We don't want the child to learn that. So we really have to stick with it even through the extinction burst, which can be very challenging, and eventually the behavior will go down. And then it's really important to consistently be reinforcing good behavior. That's something you always want to be doing as much as possible. One thing that is often helpful for most children, again, I'm just going to say for most children, not all, labeled praise. Not just praise, not just saying good job, but saying good job putting that toy in the bin. Wow, what a beautiful flower you drew. Great job doing all of your homework. Thank you for eating all that broccoli. So specifically making sure the child knows what it was they did that you like, that you want them to keep doing. Positive attention and affection can be really helpful. Affection, especially from parents, hugs, cuddles, tickles, and just generally positive attention. Quality time can be reinforcing. Again, you don't have to, tangible rewards is the next one. And yes, obviously that is reinforcing for most of us, but it doesn't always have to be that. It can just be, quality time together, doing something fun, giving them positive attention, giving the child labeled praise while you're doing this quality time. Like I said, tangible rewards, sometimes, a toy or a treat or food, whatever it might be. Extra privileges can also be a good reinforcer. So if the child did something that you like, thank you so much for doing that. You can have 5 extra minutes on whatever game or TV show or whatever it is they might want. And then token economy is another helpful tool for reinforcing good behavior. And I think that's on the next slide. Oh, good. All right, so a token economy, I'm sure any teachers out there in the audience are very familiar with this strategy, but basically it consists of sort of a point system. So a sticker chart is often used for a token economy, and a certain number of stickers or a certain number of points gets the prize. So it's kind of like when you go to an arcade and you get a bunch of tickets, and the tickets themselves they're nothing, they're paper. But you get to turn them in for that giant teddy bear that you want or whatever other exciting fun thing. Much like money, the money itself is nothing, but you can exchange it for things. And so that's what a token economy is. For children, a sticker chart is often used. Sometimes the stickers themselves can be pretty exciting and reinforcing for kids, but it's really important to remember that those stickers are earning them something else. Whether it's, again, extra recess time or extra screen time or some other fun activity or a prize of some kind or getting out of something that they don't want to do. So this is an example of a sticker chart that a person might use to increase making their bed, brushing their teeth, completing homework, and putting clothes in the hamper. And so building new behavior. Excuse me. So there's lots of different strategies for building new behavior. Again, once we have figured out the function of the behavior, we don't want to not let the child have access to the things that they want, but we want to find more appropriate ways rather than screaming or crying because they want the cookie. What are some other things they can do to earn that cookie or ask appropriately for that cookie? So scaffolding is one strategy for increasing positive behaviors. And scaffolding essentially means kind of breaking down the behavior and teaching the component parts before teaching the bigger picture. So one example is if a child is being assigned to read a chapter, maybe going through that chapter ahead of time and pulling out really tough words that the child might not know and doing some vocabulary work before assigning them to read an entire chapter. Shaping is a key one, so that's where we want to reinforce progressive attempts towards that behavior. Oops, I'm sorry. didn't mean to do that. Let me see if I can get to my, I guess not, okay. I'm gonna read my definitions here. Yeah, so reinforcing successive approximation. So if we want the child to put away all of their toys, maybe we first need to reward them for helping to put away one toy, and the next time they get rewarded for putting away 2 toys and then 3 toys, and we're working towards getting them to do the behavior that we really want them to do. Modeling is essentially just demonstrating the skill. Oh, look, copy me. I put the toy in the bin. Now you do it. Good job. Visual cues, so making sort of visual reminders, pictorial images that can be placed around the child's home or classroom that can serve as little reminders. Reinforcing attempts, so if a child is not yet able to say cookie, but they're really trying and they can say kuh, great, okay, reinforce them for that, because it's not fair to expect them to say the whole word perfectly at their developmental level. We want to meet them where they're at, and we want to move them towards the ultimate goal of whatever the final behavior is that we're hoping to get. But if you don't reinforce the child for trying, they're going to give up really fast and you're never going to get there. So meeting them where they're at and reinforcing bit by bit. So that's reinforcing attempts, similar to shaping a bit. And then fading prompts and fading reinforcements. So like I said, you might initially reinforce the child for just putting away 1 toy, but next time they're not going to get reinforced for putting away 1 toy, they're going to get reinforced for putting away 2 toys. And eventually sort of that schedule of reinforcement gets thinner and thinner and thinner until they're not really requiring a whole lot of reinforcement. They're doing all of these great behaviors, but it's because initially they were getting lots of reinforcement along the way. And then fading prompting is sort of starting with you know, more heavy prompting, more intrusive prompting. For example, if a child is learning how to say thank you when they receive a gift, the parent might initially, you know, oh, tell Tommy thank you for the birthday present, and the child has to repeat thank you for the birthday present, and then it might say, can you say thank you to Tommy? Thank you for the birthday present, and then the next time might be, what do you say? And the next time might just be an expectant look or a point. So that's what fading prompts looks like. So a lot of parents have this objection, but I shouldn't have to bribe my child to do the things that they're supposed to do. Well, sometimes you do. You probably wouldn't go to work if you didn't get paid. And likewise, children aren't necessarily going to just do what you want them to do if there's nothing in it for them and the effort is not worth the reward. If there's no reward, it's certainly not worth the effort to them, right? So that comes with individual differences. Some children are just going to do what you expect them to do. It's not that hard for them. There's some other sort of intrinsic reinforcement for them, but not all children experience the world in the same way. Some things might be harder, some things might be less intrinsically motivating for them, and so they might need some external reinforcement, and that's okay too. It's helpful to set clear expectations with clear rewards, so they know exactly what is expected of them and exactly what they're going to get for it. And we also need to remember that all humans and non-human animals also are wired to use the most effective and efficient strategy for getting their needs met. So if you just keep that in mind and can be flexible with what you're willing to do to incentivize, to motivate the child, then you're more likely to see the behaviors that you want to see. And let's talk also, before we wrap up, about effective commands. So an effective command is telling the child what to do rather than what not to do. So some examples of this are use kind hands or gentle hands, use kind words, please use a calm voice, use walking feet rather than don't run, please walk, please sit here rather than, you know, stop doing that, what are you doing? An example that I like to share about this is, well, because when you tell someone not to do it, sometimes maybe they weren't even going to do it, but now you've given them the idea. When I was probably 6 years old, my mom was ironing and she needed to do something in the other room for a minute. And she said, "Don't touch the iron, it's hot." I don't think I was planning to touch the iron, but once she said, "Don't touch the iron, it's hot," my 6-year-old brain said, "How hot is hot?" Put my hand directly on the iron, burned my entire hand. Had she simply said, "Oh, hey, can you go find me a green marker," or something like that to distract me in a different room away from the iron? "Oh, yeah. Oh, I have a job now. Mom wants me to do something for her." So giving a child an instruction of what you want them to do rather than what you don't want them to do can often be more helpful and more effective. And you're providing an opportunity for reinforcement rather than punishment. You're providing an opportunity for them to do what you asked them to do rather than, "I've asked them not to do something, now they did it, now I have to figure out how to punish them or extinguish that behavior." Whereas had she said, "Hey, honey, go find me a green marker," then I could bring her a green marker and she could say, "Thank you so much for bringing me a green marker. Good job." And that would have been a much more positive experience. We also want to try and keep things short and simple. This depends, of course, on the child's developmental and language level. But if you give a child, "I want you to go put all your toys away and then make your bed and then get dressed and then brush your teeth and then come downstairs for breakfast." Whoa, that is a lot for, say, a 4-year-old. So they're not going to remember it. They're not going to maybe understand even all of those steps that you just said. So keeping in mind the developmental level of the individual that you are speaking to is really important. As I already said, giving approach commands rather than avoidance commands provide opportunities for praise and reward rather than punishment. Now, of course, you're probably wondering to yourself, well, what about, okay, that's great for when the function of the behavior is attention or access or avoidance or escape, but what about the automatic stuff? What about the sensory or self-reinforcing behavior? So behavior that has an automatic function is much, much harder to extinguish because, again, it is self-reinforcing. So one thing we can do is find ways to channel the behavior that will be most effective. So, for example, can the behavior be done in a specific setting only, or can a different activity achieve the same stimulation? So for example, some common accommodations for children with ADHD in a classroom are those chair bands that you put around the legs of the chair, and then they can sort of kick it with their legs and stretch it, and that channels some of the physical energy. Or balance cushions that kids can get for, again, just sort of stimulating the need for sensory stimulation. Extra movement breaks, fidget toys. You can get a big box of all different kinds of fidget toys on Amazon for, pretty cheap, or I'm sure lots of other places. I don't get money from Amazon, but you can get lots of different fidget toys that are really fun and cool and provide nice stimulation. And also trying to just sort of check in about the child's emotional state. So if the child is acting out and you can't seem to find any other sources of the behavior, maybe they're feeling really anxious, maybe they're feeling really scared, maybe they're feeling really sad. So what might be the emotion behind the behavior also? Or like I said, it could be a stomach ache or a headache. So figuring out what the child needs that might be driving that behavior will be more effective than, let's say, trying to punish a child because they're crying because their stomach hurts. So some final thoughts. Patience. So patience with the child as they're learning this new set of consequences that you are making some changes to their environment. And some of those things might be really great. They might be really happy about. And some of those things they might not be so happy about, like now whining doesn't work to get me what I want. So it's going to be an adjustment for everybody. So be patient with the child and also be patient with yourself. Like I said, you are fighting your own reinforcement history too, and you're fighting your own instincts to not give in when maybe in the past you have, and you've been, again, negatively reinforced by the child not crying anymore because you gave them the cookie. So you're fighting your own instincts here too, so be patient with yourself. If you accidentally reinforce a negative behavior, it happens. It's okay, you'll recover from it. And some other things to remember, again, all children are different and have different needs, and different things are going to work for different kids. And also the best foundation for obedience and compliance is a positive relationship. So if you've ever had, a teacher or a boss that you really didn't like, you probably didn't want to do the things that they told you to do. So trying to find ways to also create positive experiences. A common suggestion is to praise twice as much as you criticize or punish. And so trying to really find a good balance between positive experiences and adjusting the child's behavior, and trying to find ways to enjoy each other's company and enjoy each other's personalities. Having fun together is a really useful tool for also ultimately gaining better compliance. And that is all I have. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, you are welcome to email me at shjcohen@ucdavis.edu. Thank you again.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was founded in 1998 with the promise to reduce and prevent the disabilities that can be associated with autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. Every day, our clinicians and researchers make progress on that promise. Our groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other conditions associated with disability are helping affected individuals achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website or our social media platforms to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.